How do the images in marketing, advertising, and packaging change the way that we perceive the world? I'm Rohit Bhargava, and this is a very special edition of the Non-Obvious Beyond Diversity Summit and a panel where we are going to answer exactly that question. And I am very, very honored to welcome three amazing panelists to this discussion. And first of all, we have Claudia Grimaldi Marx, a Senior Director of Research at Getty Images. Welcome, Claudia. Nice to see you here.
Hi, Rohit. Thanks for having me. I just want to correct you. I'm a Senior Art Director in the Creative
Senior Art Director. Okay, we got to get this right. This is very important.
That's okay. Because we do have researchers and yeah.
Okay, Senior Art Director. See, I already screwed up. This is like, now I'm going to have to spend time recovering from this, I think.
Okay. It's not a huge deal.
Thank you. No, that's an important detail. Thank you for correcting me. We also have Vimbai Kajese, who is a founder of AdTags. Did I get that right?
Yes, you did.
Okay, all right, good. So now I'm evening the score, one and one. Welcome. It's nice to have you as well.
Thank you. I'm very honored to be here live from our bedrooms.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. Live from all of our offices, bedrooms, wherever we are. And one more panelist, last but definitely not least, we have Shalina Jan Mohammed from Ogilvy Consulting. And I know I got that right because I used to work at Ogilvy, so we were former colleagues in another world, and she is the Vice President of Islamic Marketing at Ogilvy Consulting. So welcome, Shalina.
Thank you. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
So we have an amazing conversation all ready to go, and we are going to talk about imagery, and we're going to talk about specifically how imagery shifts perceptions and changes perceptions. And Claudia, I wanted to start with you because you are at Getty Images, which for people who are not familiar with it is a huge library of stock imagery that is used by the media, by marketing, by really anybody in the industry who uses images. And it's I don't even know how many millions of images you have there, but it is widely known as probably the biggest collection and the most widely used. And so you have this vantage point as an art director at Getty of seeing how people are using images. And I thought I would start with you because I wanted to get your view of how this has changed. How is the perception and the reality of how images, and particularly stock images right now, shifting in this new world?
Right. Well, thank you. I don't even know how many millions of images we have, but it's a lot. We look at ourselves as storytellers, and, the way we divvy up, the way we think about the different parts of our business is editorial captures what's going on today. In creative, we think about how the world can be, and in archive, we document our past and our history. So we take all those things into account, and when we look at how the world can be, we think about, not just what our clients are looking for and what kinds of imagery they would like to license. We try to be a little bit more proactive in offering up the kinds of content to show the kind of world the way we'd like it to be. So we think about intersectionality. We think about making sure it's true and reflective of identity and all the identities that are possible in the world. We think about diversity and inclusion, but beyond race. We try to make sure we're working with our brands that encapsulates various identities, and that represents the sort of full spectrum of diversity and inclusion in the world.
Well, and you've been really forward thinking as an organization in terms of creating collections of images that are unusual and perhaps challenging perceptions. I mean, I just know the collection from having seen it for some time, and personally as well, because about 10 years ago, my family and I posed for a collection of stock images because they wanted to show a brown family, and what what intergenerationally we would look like, because a lot of stock imagery at that point just didn't show us or depict us in that way. And I think that's definitely changed when you look at the imagery that's available now.
Yeah, I think we've always been acutely aware of trying to offer up content that showed the world as it really is, and not just this small part of it that sort of mimics what we've seen historically. And we felt like we had to create certain collections that helped our customers find this imagery so that we could offer up that responsibility to them. We know that this content's out there. It's been on offer. We're constantly striving to improve it. But things like the disability collection that was sponsored by Verizon, Project Show Us that was in partnership with Dove, the Disrupt Aging collection, and even the Nosotros collection, to us, they're not unusual. They're normal. They're how the world looks and what you see in the world when you look around at everyone, and what we feel is our responsibility to offer to our clients for them to be able to have that selection to use however they need to use in their projects.
Yeah, it's so important. And one of the things we're teaming up on is to identify some non-obvious images as well. So we're going to share more about that very soon. Vinbai, I want to turn to you and talk about your journey towards solving a problem that you saw, which is that you didn't see representation in the imagery that you found out there. And so you decided to solve it by creating your own initiative around it. So tell us a little bit about Ad Tags. What was the mission behind it, and what drove you to start it?
Well, I'll tell you what drove me to start it. I'm a classic third culture kid with third culture issues. So describing where I'm from is quite difficult, but it meant that I spent a lot of my time living around the world being what I call the only spotted dot. I was the only brown person with freckles from my country, Zimbabwe. And so I grew up in societies where I did not see myself, and I was the only Zimbabwean. I didn't see myself on TV. I didn't see myself represented in the dolls I played with. And so that can really mess with you. It was only recently, I would say in the last couple of decades, where I realized that this is actually a type of trauma. Lack of representation is a trauma when you don't see yourself because you don't know what you can aspire to be. And so it took moving from China, being in China and understanding the value of people seeing me and in the media, what that impact had, and going back to Africa and seeing the lack of representation there, or the misrepresentation because it lacked so much cultural and location context. It took me going back there to just be like, wow, we really need to do something about it. There's so much more than just representation that needs to be worked on. There's also issues of colorism, right? Because even if you are showing more brown people, it's not always the same tone. It's not always the darker tones. And so that's what led me to create this initiative of Ad Tags. And what we do is we are building a platform. We're currently trying to help people of color monetize their Instagram pictures and social media pictures so that brands can use them in advertising. Because what we noticed, or what I noticed, is that there was a huge discrepancy between how brands were portraying folks who were using their brands and how they were actually used. And it was because of age difference. It was because of racial difference for the folks who are making these decisions in these big agencies and portraying folks who are on the streets actually interacting with their brands. And so for me, I saw this huge gap. And so that's what we started, and that's why I'm here.
And just to give people a little more context into your story, I wanna tell them a little bit more about it, because when you say you were in China, I mean, you were one of, if not the first, African news broadcasters in China. And when you were on TV, seeing someone who looked like you was hugely impactful for a lot of people. And you have some amazing stories of how you kind of realized that and uncovered it, because you really did some groundbreaking work when you were there.
Yes, I believe that. Thank you. I was working at one of the news agencies behind the scenes. I was just trying to get my foot in the door. And I remember looking up at one of the screens, and we had all the screens there. And I remember thinking, there's no Black person there. But given the relationship that China had with Africa, it didn't make sense. And so I said, I will be the first one. I didn't know how, but I just said that. And 8 months later, with a lot of rejections, and you name it, all the worst rejections ever, based off of people won't understand me because of because I'm African, they hadn't heard me, or we won't have makeup for her, which was true. They did not have makeup for me. Based on all of these things, somehow managed to get that role. And the impact was quite overwhelming, because I did not only represent people of color there, but foreigners started to feel safer for being in China. They would say things like, when I saw you, I called my mother and told her, Mom, I am safe. They have a Black woman on TV. Or I would have friends or people come up to me and tell me, like, when you first appeared on the TV screen, I thought there was some sort of cross-channeling with another channel. And I went and hit the screen because I was just like, what is this? Like, why is there a Black woman there? Like, nobody knew. I just appeared. But the messages I got were so inspiring, because people would say, like, I didn't know that could be a career. And I would get letters from, fathers with daughters from random islands just saying, like, oh my goodness, I want my daughter to be like you. I want her to be on TV. And this is the truth. My hair, because I was natural as a Black woman on TV, got more interview requests than me. So everybody wanted to know, how are you allowed to wear your natural hair on TV and not have to hide it under a wig or straighten it? And that was really important. It was really important to show up fully as a Black woman with natural hair, as God had given it to me, to grow out of its roots like this.
Yeah, it's such an important, every element of that story is so important. And you're really talking about representation and the power of that. And Shelina, I want to talk to you also about representation, because you are in a role where you're leading Islamic marketing at a huge marketing and advertising agency, and the level of commitment that is being shown towards that is in itself kind of an evolution, I think, because presumably there are brands who are saying Islamic customers are important to us, and we want to be able to position and talk to them in a way that is respectful and that is not outdated or stereotypical. So what does your role look like? What do you do, and how do you talk to brands who are perhaps just getting started with figuring out what their Islamic marketing plan should be?
It's amazing to think that the idea that there is a Muslim consumer audience is still so innovative. So Ogilvy Islamic Marketing was founded in 2010 and was really a very cutting edge, pioneering part of Ogilvy's offer to the world to say, hey, there are audiences out there that aren't the kind of very narrow mainstream, and mainstream itself is a very difficult concept. There aren't this kind of mainstream consumer, and they would like to buy things from us. And I often tell a little joke amongst CEOs and CMOs, say Muslims, they buy stuff, and everyone laughs, and then everyone feels a bit nervous and says, yeah, it's true. And it just shows that we in ourselves as people understand this concept, but somehow professionally, as organizations, as businesses, we haven't really made it the norm that we think about all these different various audiences, of which Muslim audiences are the one that I'm championing, and extending that into bigger Black, Asian, minority ethnic communities. And so the kind of work that we do at our organization, thinking about Islamic marketing, is to talk to some of the world's biggest brands and some of the most exciting startups to think about who this audience is and how to build very insightful messaging, right from thinking about, kind of idea, business growth, business planning. So I said, as part of our consulting team that thinks about how you establish businesses for a new audience, to propositions, all the way downstream through to campaigns and execution. And what I think is every day a surprise and a joy is that at every stage of this, there is so much opportunity because it is so untapped. And I think it's better to think of it as something positive. There is a history, there are challenges about why these different audiences have not been engaged with. But today, the approach I take with our clients that come to Ogilvy is to say that this is a growth opportunity for your business. And I think more than ever, we need it going into 2021. But it's also a chance to be inclusive in a meaningful way, because to be a consumer, just as we were hearing now, that is spoken to through your needs and sees you as even-handedly and as respectfully as any other consumer is a very powerful and meaningful thing. And that's what we talk to our clients about, is like, who is the Muslim audience? How do they intersect in a meaningful, non-exploitative way with your brand? How do you talk to them in a respectful way? What is a meaningful insight with which to engage with them? And that's a kind of an outreach to this untapped audience. But then we also think about, in your broader communications, your broader product, your broader proposition, and your brand, how do you ensure that Muslim audiences and other Black, Asian, minority ethnic communities are integrated and feel like a very natural part of that communication? Because that is also important. I think one of the big challenges is ensuring that groups don't become other, a kind of little afterthought. So we work with brands to do both of those things.
Yeah, and you are you're talking about it and dealing with an audience that I think in many ways is often treated as one audience when in fact it's many different audiences, right? I mean, you have Muslim audiences who are who have grown up in one place. You have a crossover with Muslim audiences who are also African American. You have all of these different segments. I mean, it's sort of like the temptation that a lot of times you see in marketing to say, well, we need to reach Hispanic audiences, not realizing that there's Cubans, there's Puerto Rican, there's Mexican, there's so many different subcultures within that, or even Asian. I mean, we see the same thing. Like, we need to reach Asians. Well, okay, do you mean Koreans or Indians, or like what do you mean by that? So when you do get into that meeting and they say, okay, give us the Islamic marketing plan, do you have to reset their expectation a little bit and say, okay, well, who are we specifically talking about, and how do you do that?
So the approach we take, so if you were a client and you came to us, is to just remind and walk through with our clients the same marketing principles that we use with any other consumer group or any other audience. But we do that through the lens of experts and through analysis and data, both qual and quant. And, if you said, we have a brand X and we want to increase our sales by, Y%, we might say, okay, well, the Muslim audience is a really strong audience, and this might be for this particular segment within it. And then we look at what the insight would be. So it's just ensuring we apply the same marketing principles. But sometimes, in our decade-long experience, we know that sometimes people don't know how to find that right insight. Sometimes people feel nervous. They're worried about doing the wrong thing. Actually, sometimes brands don't go far enough. And actually, a lot of the work that we do with the consumers talks about being braver, bolder, more courageous, funnier, self-deprecating. Because, there is this myth that, as soon as you put, a kind of arrow, this product is for Muslims, or, Black women come here, that's going to solve your marketing problem. And that is actually one of the most disingenuous and disrespectful things I think you can do as a business, is to just, stick a moon logo for Muslims in the corner and expect that they're going to come to you. You need kind of expert advice to ensure that you're properly sophisticated. And
otherwise
you've got to have the right balance of being very obvious, but also using subtlety and sophistication. And I think people are starting to understand that we do need to have a communication and engagement, but just don't know how to do it in an effective way, and that's where experts come in.
Yeah, because otherwise it turns into pandering, I think, and that's absolutely right. And Claudia and Vimbai, I think that in both of your work and in both of what you've been doing, there is a level of expertise, as Shalina just said, to finding the right visuals to communicate the right messages. And I want to try and focus on that a little bit, because it's not an easy thing to do. It's a skill that is required. And Claudia, maybe we'll start with you, because you're an art director and you're thinking about this all the time in terms of matching that image and the perfect image. And like we said before, there's millions, maybe even billions of options out there. Yeah. How do you approach that when you first start that task? Like, for example, we talked about this summit, and we have a bunch of different themes across the summit. And one of the things we came to you with is, look, we've got these themes and we want to have some images to bring those to life. And you very kindly put together a board for us, and we're going to be sharing those images throughout the conference. How do you approach a task like that? What do you do first? How do you kind of break that down?
I mean, I think part of it is to really approach what you're trying to achieve by looking at the connection you're trying to make with your audience, and look at what is your product or your brand saying to that person, and sort of to think about looking for different types of depictions in body types, in abilities, in just the human experience, and making sure that you're not being tokenistic about it and you're not being performative and just including one person, or making them too obvious in a way that's what was mentioned before. You want to make sure that you're really talking about an emotion and about a feeling and about the meaning behind your brand and what you're trying to convey, and then sort of keep that sort of natural intersectionality between life experiences and the human experience in what you're talking about. So when you think about culture, you're thinking about how culture is, something that people enjoy in so many different kinds of ways and different ages and nationalities and different. There's a lot of different aspects to it, a lot of different facets, and to sort of really think about on a larger scale what that looks like and what that means.
And Vinbai, what about for you when it comes to curating those images and deciding on what you want to display and what you want to bring into the collection? And in your case, also sort of thinking about the quality aspect of it. You probably have kind of more capacity that people want to give you that maybe you don't include in the collection.
It's interesting because where we're starting is just from the basics. We just have so many gaps of regular lifestyle to fill, like, Black woman pointing, sitting in a park, going to an ATM. So the categories span wide and deep. But what's very important to me, which is what Claudia mentioned, is that we have put an emphasis on emotion, because that is where we've noticed that, people of color, Black people especially, are not represented in the full range. It's usually something that's usually tragic, or something that is always, hardship, right? And so for me, this is, my activism. So my activism is showing people of color and Black people in between the moments when they're not protesting social justice, when they're just being teenagers, when they're just eating with their families, when they're studying, things like that. So for me, it's very basic, very basic categories that we have to fill, because it's amazing where we don't show up, but also the emotions that come with it are super important. So making sure that when I'm requesting images for people to submit, that they think hard about the emotions. And what you find out is a lot of the world is quite emotionally illiterate. So you kind of have to be like, hey, this emotion, and get people to really think about it and to feel it and to put themselves there. And so because we're starting from the basics, we have to seed a lot of the images ourselves. And so we want to differentiate ourselves from being typical stock photography. But the reality is we're going to have to pose for them ourselves. We're going to have to be the subject matter, right? And so these are some of the challenges that we have to deal with. So can you repeat the second question again?
Yeah, I'm not sure I had a second question. I think that was pretty good. I really like that idea of thinking about the emotion behind these things. And I know that when it comes to the way that imagery is used, there's a lot of mistakes that people make. And so, Shelina, I'm going to turn to you for one question, because I want to ask you actually about your books and another world of yours outside of your day job. But right after that, I want to give all of you a little bit of a warning, because I want to do a little bit of a do's and don'ts session with all of you, where I want you to share some frustrating uses of image, some bad uses of image that we want people to just never do again, like the two white male hands shaking hands.
Yes.
Done, that sort of thing. So we want to talk about some don'ts, and then we want to talk about some do's. So I want you to be thinking about that. And before we get to that part, Shelina, I want to talk to you about your books. So you are a author. You've done several books, and you've really tried to change perception through your work there. And I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about the project that inspired you to do them, and take us behind the scenes.
Yeah, I'm wondering if we're going to do kind of live action conference here. So I'm going to stand up so you can know that these books are real.
Yeah,
So,
great. We'll switch out to the wide view so we
yeah.
can
Do you want me to do that again? No, here we
No,
go.
no, we're good. We can see
So
it.
I want to show you these. So this was the first book, and this was published in 2009. And this was, so for anyone who really feels like they want to change imagery out there, this is how I did it. So an author is not really supposed to get involved in a cover. But the story I wanted to tell was, a very different, positive, upbeat story of being a Muslim woman. And the picture, the kind of sketches that the editor had commissioned were kind of this woman in a very long coat, and, it kind of was in very drab colors. And I was like, listen, I don't want to even read that book. I'm scared of this person on it, because that's the kind of prevailing image that we had. And so I very much crossed all the boundaries that authors are not supposed to cross. And showed a montage of the kind of imagery that was out there about Muslim women. And it was all kind of, long black abayas and black scarves, and, kind of like we were hearing just now about, these kind of unemotional images. And it was only when I confronted her, and I use confront in the sort of challenging sense, rather, she was very open to the conversation, that actually she then went away to think about what a Muslim woman might actually look like. And again, there was this disconnect between the fact that, she was seeing me, and she had read my story, so she knew what it was all about. And yet somehow this kind of latent sense of what a Muslim woman should look like was coming through. And ultimately, we came up with this, which is a much nicer picture and actually depicts what the story is about rather than what we think it should be about. And then the second one, again, a lot of work went into this. This is Generation M. So this was looking at, what young Muslims around the world today are, how they're shaping the future. And again, we didn't want to go for something very typical. We wanted to create something that was very bold, very vibrant. But that takes a lot of work, because you have to really think about what you're trying to convey and the power of that image on a book cover, or actually for anyone who's creating a product, what is the power of that image on your packaging, on your product, in your visuals that you're using for your brand and your organization. And I think while I want everyone to do more of it, we shouldn't underestimate the creative energy that's required to be innovative and to create something new. But the dividends are really huge. And I think for any brand thinking about that meaningful inclusivity, thinking about business growth, ensuring you can create that image that really cuts through and is meaningful and bold and powerful and captures the spirit for these underrepresented audiences, it's really, really important. And it's worth preparing yourself for the fact it will take the first, second, third, fourth time that you do it, that extra bit of creative energy, but then it will start to pay dividends.
Yeah, I really like that, and I love the creative process behind the work that you did to rethink the cover, because that is a place where people start to form those perceptions in a really powerful way. Let's go back to the 4-box view because I want to shift our conversation to action. And one of the things that has been a big focus of this conference in particular is not just to talk about what might be nice to happen, which is a good starting point, but we also want to give people some very practical, do this right now, do this tomorrow type of advice that allows them to change the way that they're thinking about and doing the things that they put out into the world. And it's easy to think, when it comes to imagery in particular, and using kind of different types of stock imagery, that is just up to a certain number of people who are doing marketing or advertising or packaging. But in fact, many of us in many ways are making very deliberate choices about using images. If you put an image into a PowerPoint presentation, if you put an image into a blog post that you've written, if you chose to share an image on social media with your fans or with your followers or with your family, these are all intentional choices. And the imagery that we choose to share tells a story, and it shifts perceptions and it changes perceptions, and it's important. And so we want to talk about imagery in marketing and branding and packaging. That's the focus of this, but it's a highly relatable topic, I think, to all of us, because at some point we are all making these choices about what images to share, what perceptions to perpetuate or stereotypes to perpetuate, or which ones to perhaps help kill. And so I want to shift into this do's and don'ts. I'm very excited about talking on that topic. So let's see. Do we have a volunteer? Like, who would like to go first? Like, who's got some great do's and don'ts? Okay, Bimba, I see your hand first. So we'll do this game show style. All right. So
Okay,
first,
so
give it to us.
do I do both at the same time, or
No,
do I?
let's start with the negative and
Okay.
focus on that. Then we can go to the positive. How about that? So let's
Okay.
just focus on the don'ts for now. Let's do a round robin on the don'ts.
Okay, so my first one is when you're capturing really dark-skinned people, please don't portray them as otherworldly or in this alien type of fashion, because I see that a lot. They are normal people doing normal things, and I would like to see less of that. This kind of shock, just because somebody has a lot of melanin. So that's the first thing. Should I continue down my list?
Yes, you should. Yeah.
Okay. The second thing is localize. So please don't reuse the same like one Nigerian to represent all Black people. And this was something that was perpetuated a lot on the African continent. It would just be you would have a Black American, and we would know like this person is not from our country, or this person is not from our region, for example. Please don't use the same person and just change the shirt and try and think you can get away with it. You've got to localize because
what is the I just want to dig into that a little bit, because I think there's a lesson in this, which is
yes.
What are the giveaways for you as an African when you look at images and you're like, oh, they don't know what they're doing. They're using the entirely wrong image. Like, what are the warning signs that you look at?
Well, I study feature because I've lived around. I can tell where people are from. And so if I see one bank using one image, and then maybe it might not be a bank, but it'll be a telecom company using that same image and they change the shirt, for me, that's just a warning sign that you're lazy. But also what it tells me is that the decision makers on that team were not of color. So this is what I can tell. You can tell who was in the room when certain decisions were made. You can tell whose creative ideas and inputs were taken. You can even tell the age, just even from the way the photo has been constructed and the pose and everything. You can tell the demographic of the people who are behind these creative decisions. So these are so many dead giveaways.
Yeah, I mean, in my world, in my culture, being Indian, like, and when I look at some of these images, like, there's a certain type of mustache that you know that if somebody has that type of mustache, they're from a certain part of India.
Yes.
And, you know, like, you would know that if you were South Asian, if you looked at a certain, like, if you had that curly mustache, like, that means you're from a certain part of India.
Yes.
And somebody else might look at that and be like, oh, that's just an Indian dude with a mustache.
Yes. Yes. And also, like, with, you know, back to like the hair thing, if you see Black women portrayed in a professional setting with only straight hair, that says a lot about the mindset that folks are trying to perpetuate. Unfortunately, but it needs to happen. Having natural hair and being Black in a professional setting and having that in an image is actually quite daring. I would like to see more of that. So don't only have straight hair and weaves when it comes to Black folks.
Okay. Do you have more? Do you have more don'ts for us? You said you have a list, so
I have I have another thing, and don't steal. Please ask to use people's social media pictures if you're a brand. Please pay fast and credit the creators of that. So what we're seeing is because there's not enough images of people of color, brands would just kind of like steal and use an image in another country. And I've had that happen to myself. I've had that happen to friends. Friends would see their images on like literal billboards in the UK because people and brands they're starving for that range, that diversity, and sometimes they need images quickly and they think they can get away with it. Please don't do that. Content producers who are not, professional photographers, but still can produce high imaginative quality content need to be recognized and need to be acknowledged and need to be paid on time. So please don't steal and please don't take all the credit.
Excellent warnings. And I know, Claudia, I know you agree with the don't steal part at the very
Yeah,
least, but give us some of
absolutely.
your don'ts.
Yeah, I wanted to start with the one of the things that oh my God, I'm totally messing up your name.
Bye.
Vimbai, that Vimbai mentioned was the authenticity. The authenticity of your models and what they're doing and how they're dressed and how their hair is. Across the board, we have a lot of initiatives in our contributor community to recruit photographers, because one of the things that we believe strongly is that who's behind the lens is as important who is in front of the lens. And so we want to support photographers, but also because we know that the photographers that we hire to or that we contract to sign with Getty to syndicate their work, we know it's important that they're able to tell the stories more authentically than just everyone else, basically, and that they'll understand these messages and those sort of cultural cues in certain parts of the world to sort of really tell an authentic story. So that is one thing that we do tell everyone, though, that they should be aware of these things. They should be aware of, again, avoiding tokenism, making sure that their casting is as diverse as possible. One of the things that I would say is a don't, just to go back a little bit more simplistically, is if you're casting a group or you're casting for a shoot for something, to not have it like as an afterthought, like I have to have one brown person and one black person and one Indian person and one Asian person. You want to really think about the reality of the situation that you're shooting and the reality of the culture that you're shooting in, and what is the emotion and what's going on in that scene, and how to sort of transcend what the authentic what the stereotypes are in that situation. Let's see. I have so many things. Another thing I wanted to mention about don't doing is with seniors, people who are considered seniors and older people. There's still a misconception that people who are older, who are considered seniors in this world, have no proficiency with technology, don't know how to get along in the world, just screw everything up, and they're just kind of sitting around, not really participating in life or doing anything or still working, and that's completely untrue. And we want to make sure that people who are seniors are portrayed authentically as well. And we want to make sure that, people have vibrant lives, they work, they do jobs, they get on social media, they create, TikToks and videos and do everything that most other people do. And they should be portrayed as such. So sort of be aware of that as well when it comes to like aging, when it comes to disability or ability. We want to make sure that that's as included as well. Just because someone is in a wheelchair, it shouldn't just be that's the subject of the photo. You know what I mean? People who happen to be in wheelchairs also have jobs, they have lives, they have wives and children and husbands and friends, and they go out, and that goes across the board for every other kind of disability and ability in the world. And we want to make sure that's included as well. And those are the kinds of things you should be thinking about when searching for imagery for anything.
Yeah, one of the things we heard over and over again from, and we've had many disabled participants who are speakers at the summit, and one of the messages we heard over and over is, look, I'm not here to be your source of inspiration.
Yeah.
I don't always need to be depicted as this inspirational hero just because I got out of bed this morning.
Yeah.
It's fine to depict me as like going to work and just doing what I normally do.
Yeah. Raising kids.
More realistic.
Going out and having friends and dating. I mean, one of the briefs we put out for our contributors was seniors dating, which, happens, but it's not as
well, no one wants to think of their parents dating, but I get it like that. That's important. I mean, you're right, because we do fall into these kind of stereotypical things, and we see that all the time in marketing and advertising. I mean, there's a whole campaign from an insurance company right now that's like totally the whole campaign is making fun of old people.
Yes, exactly.
And it's clearly written by people who aren't in that category.
It's still upsettingly easy to spot these mistakes or stereotypes across the board for almost every group that's been marginalized. And that's one of the things we're trying to actively, not just to our clients and our customers, but within our contributor base, that we have this content to offer.
So, Shalina, I want you to give us, I know you have some good don'ts because the imagery that is used frequently to portray Muslims is just pathetic in many cases. And I think you'll probably agree with that. So I know you have some don'ts. And then I want to very quickly shift to close with some positive do's and get those from all of you. So give us some of the don'ts.
Well, the biggest one, if you're thinking about your Muslim audience, is don't assume all Muslims are Arab or wear Arab dress. Muslims, there's 1.8 billion Muslims around the world, and they live in every country imaginable. In fact, there's more than 80 countries with more than 1 million Muslims, and they have long histories and heritages. So be mindful when you are using imagery of Muslims of where they are from and that they correctly represent their backgrounds and that they fit into the campaigns or the kind of imagery that you're using. And in particular, we do have a trend in imagery to use very kind of neutral, non-affiliated coloring or brown, but actually it's really important when thinking about Muslim audiences to ensure that different ethnicities, heritages, races are properly represented. It's not enough to put your token Muslim image in. You must think about your diversity as well within that Muslim representation. And the same applies when you are thinking about imagery of Muslim women. Unfortunately, as we were discussing earlier, sometimes there's a sort of slot for a Muslim person and a slot for somebody of a Black heritage. And once they're filled, that's it. But actually, you can't just use a Muslim woman in a headscarf to fill that entire Muslim slot, because actually many Muslim women simply don't wear the headscarf, and that's completely fine. So you do need to think about that variation. Don't just pick a sort of stereotyped pigeonhole. As an aside, not all pictures of terrorists need to be of Muslims, please. And in particular, if there is a horrible story about terrorism, it does not need to be illustrated with a picture of a Muslim woman, especially if Muslim women had nothing to do with it. There is a terrible tendency to do that. Other things I would quickly say don't do. Please don't take your imagery of Muslim women or Muslims or people of underrepresented audiences down the road to your IT guy who happens to be Muslim and ask him if the picture is okay. And the same thing, don't do that to your finance partner either. They are not experts in assessing your images. They are experts in their own job. Find somebody who actually can assess your images and ensure that they are correct for your communications.
Such great tips. I hope everybody is taking some serious notes.
The amount of people who get asked to do that, and actually it's both disrespectful to the person you're asking and actually disrespectful to yourself to show that you have so little self-awareness of what you're trying to achieve that you do that. And finally, just building on another comment from earlier, don't just ask your friend who you happen to commission previously to go and take your photos. Do ensure, so here's your do ensure that you are asking people from within those audiences to be the people behind the gaze, behind the camera. It's not enough to be in front of the camera. If you do have people in front of the camera, please trust them when they tell you something that's authentic or not authentic. Don't force them into positions to fit your story, your narrative, your vision of what that image should look like. Trust them. Make sure you have people behind the camera. Make sure also, so I come from an advertising agency, please make sure your strategists and your creatives and the planners also represent those audiences, because the idea doesn't go wrong at the end. It's not putting it in front of somebody and going, why is this person in this image? The idea goes wrong at the beginning, where you do your brief, where the right people are discussing the idea, where they're in the room. That is where your idea is created. If you get it right at that end, it's going to work all the way through to the other end. And that's exactly how we approach it at Ogilvy is, you get the insight and the expertise at the beginning. We sit together with experts and we kind of really chew over the idea. We really bash it out to make sure it's correct. And then it goes through the process. So don't do it at the end, do it at the beginning.
You have nicely shifted us into the do's, which is where I want to close. And I'd like to get one or two from Vimbai from you, and then we'll give the last word to Claudia. So, go ahead with a couple of do's, things that we should do.
I would say do call things out. So I often get things advertised to me on social media, and it's like, use this for your skin, use this for your hair, and I don't see anybody like me depicted on there, so I call it out. So I will say, thank you, but I don't think I was intended for this because I don't see myself represented there, and I don't think it is safe for me to use. So I do that a lot, and usually it's quite interesting. You'll see a change within a couple of weeks. So do call things out when you see that they're lacking, and of course, if they're targeting you. Another thing is, just to kind of reiterate what other people have said, is you have to allow the people who are being depicted to be the authors of that depiction, to be behind the cameras, to be in front of it, and as Celine said, to trust their direction when they say this is or isn't authentic. Another fun thing I would say to do is practice, no matter if you are a professional photographer or not. We all have very powerful, high quality smartphones. Well, a lot of people do practice recreating renditions of kind of stereotypical scenarios. With yourselves in them, especially if you are a person of color. I think that is very important to kind of shock the whole visual landscape into seeing women and men and all the different levels of the intersectionality scale doing different things that we've not normally seen them do before, which does happen behind closed doors, but it's not necessarily depicted in the media. And I think the last one is just volunteer yourself, right? This is going to take the efforts of, everybody. So, I need to put myself out there and, volunteer myself to be in pictures, because we need to see more Black people with freckles and not think that it is a disease, right? So you've got to volunteer yourself. I'm speaking to photographers and, partnering with them, and they're just like, yeah, I have this database. It's just my family. That's what I use in all my marketing material. You've got to volunteer yourselves, because I do believe the future in imaging and media and ads is going to come from, it's crowdsourced from the consumers. It's going to be more user generated. And so start practicing doing that. You don't have to be perfect, but it is part of telling your story, even if you put it out there, that people see you on holiday, people see you going to the bank, people see you eating salad, whatever it is. Just start volunteering yourselves, and you never know, you could be part of somebody's social media campain.
Yeah, hopefully that's not a newsflash to anyone that Black people with freckles eat salad. So you should be depicting that, like, right?
And you laugh hysterically while you're eating the salad. That's
yeah. All right, Claudia, bring us home with.
Oh gosh, I mean, you all have said such amazing things, and a lot of what I think I would repeat is, but the main thing I would say that, especially for me as a white person sitting where I do, is educate yourself. I mean, don't what was said before about, learning what the culture is about and trusting your models and the people that you're photographing to tell you about their experiences and their lives. A lot of times we're not asking photographers to check boxes. You don't want to just check boxes. You want to really tell authentic stories and try to understand the culture and try to make sure you're depicting people in an authentic way and also in a positive way. I mean, like I said, where the creative department at Getty is about depicting the world as we'd like it to be, or as we in the future, sort of. And so we like to sort of think about the positive aspects of embracing who people really are and what they really look like. And so you need to educate yourself and listen to what people are saying, listen to what the panelists here are saying, what everyone's saying about, how disabled people are not there to be your inspiration, and then they're people with full lives and full experiences, and that goes for everybody across the board. And as a photographer, you should be learning to hear that and to show that and to depict that respectfully. And the people in marketing and people who are choosing those images should be thinking about that as well, and be able to spot the things that are wrong at that point. And I think by educating yourself and listening to what people are saying about the things that are wrong, you can learn from that and apply that to what you're doing. And, of course, come to Getty Images and look for what you need, because we have so much. And if you don't see it, ask us. We're happy to create it. We're working very hard to try to cover it all.
Well, that's a great reminder. go to Getty Images, go to ad tags.
Yeah.
There are many places to get amazing imagery. There's no excuse for being lazy or stereotypical with your imagery, especially after listening to this amazing panel. So I want to thank all of you for being part of this very, very important discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You have been watching a very special panel discussion about visualizing diversity using imagery in marketing, advertising, packaging, and everything else, blog posts, whatever you use to make sure that you are being as diverse and inclusive as possible. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to tune in to nonobviousdiversity.com to check out even more sessions like this from the Diversity Summit. I am your host, Rohit Bhargava, with a reminder to always stay non-obvious.